I'm here with John Power, CEO of Aerogen, one of Ireland's most successful and quietly revolutionary entrepreneurs. And his journey to the top of MedTech hasn't been atypical, we'll say, but that might be what makes it so compelling. So thanks, John, for being here with us. So maybe we'll just start at the beginning. You were born in London. Maybe you could just tell us a bit kind of what that was like growing up there, but obviously with very strong Irish roots.
Yeah, so born in London of Galway parents, who immigrated out to London in the 50s, like many more on the boat at that time. So grew up really, it seems strange when you tell people now, but we grew up really in an Irish community in the middle of South London, Wimbledon area. Um, the national school or primary school I went to was, I'd say at the time, 90% of the kids were Irish, of Irish parents, whether born in Ireland or born in the UK or England, I should say. And the teachers were all Irish as well. So it was, or again, of Irish parents. So it was very much an Irish community, and we would have socialized totally within that community, and that was the norm as far as I was concerned growing up. We were Irish kids being brought up in London, really.
And you had a big extended family, presumably back here in Galway, that you came
Well,
home.
like most families, everybody immigrated at that time. So there was a time when there was just one from each family, with the parents, my grandparents, so on the farm, and the father's family had a pub in Uchterard. So all the others immigrated, but then gradually came back when they had children and what have you. So yes, so I'd have like dozens and dozens of cousins and uncles and aunts all the way, but from really between the three parishes of where I lived, my Cullen and Callan and Uchterard. There's sort of, my parents came from Callan and Uchterard. My maternal grandmothers came from my Cullen. So yeah.
Very good. And so your folks left in the 50s, John. So presumably that was economic reasons.
Yeah, this wasn't sustainable, small farms, and their only option in them days was immigration. It's like not a matter of choice. It was, you got a few bob together and was sent on the bus and the train off to Holyhead, or else off to America if you had enough money.
Yeah, of course. And did your parents end up moving back eventually?
Their intent always was, like every Irish family, I think the intent was always to move back. And, I can remember as a kid, my mother saying to me, a little boy, now remember, you're only a visitor in this country. That it was always part and parcel. We were there for a time, and would then be moving back to Galway. So, unfortunately, my father died over in London, but my mother then moved back the year after he died, and she came back and was nearly 20 years then back living in Galway. She left us, I think, when she was about 17, something like that, and went over to London. But she was, honestly, from day one she moved back, it was like she'd never left the place. It didn't faze her at all. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But
Uh,
we'd have been back here every year. We'd have been back every summer as kids. We'd spend time on the summer on the farm and what have you.
so would you have always felt Irish, John?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was never really a question of it ever. It never crossed my mind, and certainly growing up during what we know as the Troubles, as a teenager in London, you had to pick your side anyway. It was, let's say you 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 became politically aware fairly quickly. Maybe a lot because you had to inform yourself of what was really happening and be able to stand your corner.
Yeah, yeah. It makes sense. So I think I read you left school at 16. It was a
Yeah.
pretty bold move. What was kind of going on in your life at that time? Was that sort of common in your circle, or
Yeah,
yeah,
we were working class family. We grew up. We went good. I went was very fortunate. I went to good schools, and the school I went to, Wimbledon College, in London, was a really good school. It was Jesuit run school. Um, Absolutely brilliant to go there, and education wise, it was great. It wasn't really. Uh, I wouldn't put it down to any lack of. I'd been working since I was 15, and weekends and what have you, on building sites and all sorts. So to me, it was more about having money in the back pocket and than anything else. And so I didn't want. I could have stayed on, and I went 1 year in sixth form, and I just decided, you know what, I've had enough of this. I was earning more money at the weekends, so I just thought, I'm going to go and get a job, and so I got a job as a draftsman. Always enjoyed technical drawing and sort of more on the analytical side of stuff. Well, I liked history and arts as well. But regardless, there was a job in it. I got a job as a draftsman on drawing boards with ink and pen, as in the old days, and learnt the trade of engineering really from shop floor up, because you'd spend time in the machine shops and on the shop floor, and so old style sort of engineering works, I guess. But you learned an awful lot. And then they sent me through night school and day release, and did ONC and HND. And then I did a course in automation and robotics, the first course that was run in England at that time. Um, and that was kind of because I realized really I needed that to move across from being sort of a well-paid technician to being an engineer. And um, I also realized that there was sort of, it wasn't back then, if you did mechanical engineering, that's what you were, mechanical, and you did electrical. Electronics was coming into it, and software was just beginning to be a thing. And I kind of realized, I was design. I worked in design. I figured if I was going to be a design engineer, I needed to understand all the facets of engineering technically. And so, I did a course for it's about just under a year in automation and robotics, where you learn coding and they brought together different disciplined engineers, and basically got this new form of engineer that was sort of had skills in across functions.
so that would have been very progressive at the time, John, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, it was a great opportunity to get, and I grabbed it. Not that I wanted to leave; it was up in Chesterfield, up in Derbyshire, but I didn't want to leave London particularly, but it was worth it for getting that qualification, and that kind of propelled me on. Then when I left that the college there, I got a job straight away back in London, but in a new company that was starting up to develop robotics. Um, PC revolution had just sort of got going, and there was a feeling that the next wave would be robotics and automation. Now it was a bit early for it, really. We were working on home robots. This is going back, over 30 years ago, and working on robots, for double arm robots to work in the home. It was a venture funded company that was real progressive, and I got attracted to it by the name. It was Universal Machine Intelligence, and I just thought, what great name of a company. And so I worked there, and I got exposed there, not just to broad engineer, and they brought in experts in, we had artificial intelligence experts working in it back then. And, everybody thinks this is a new thing, but, we were working on it back in those days. And they got guys from America and Europe and brought them in who were all, I was very lucky as a young engineer. But I guess what I had that a lot of them didn't have, they're all heavily academic, whereas I'd been working and knew how to get things turned and how to deal with suppliers and contractors and machine shops and what have you. So I ended up, I think I was running the design department when I was 26. So, you
Amazing.
know, um, but I was married then as well with first of 5 kids. So, it was just the way it was. I see
Yeah.
guys now aren't leaving college until their early 30s, so I can't figure it out myself. I'd been 10 years in working in industry by the time I was 26. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there then kind of came aerospace and the move back to Ireland. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I was always looking, although I love robotics and automation, um, I was always thinking of a route back to Ireland, and really there wasn't the technology work in Ireland for me at that time. There wasn't a lot of it, let's put it that way. Digital had shut in Galway. Everyone remembers that back in from the sort of, so there wasn't really a lot of opportunities. So I figured I'd need to bring my own opportunity back to Ireland, and I'd been working in automation in an aerospace project that was really interesting, and we formed a joint venture then with the English company who was working on this technology with us, and we were going to set up a venture at Knock Airport. Actually, at the time, the government wanted to turn Knock into an industrial free port similar to Shannon. And so we were developing this project to bring back there, but in aerospace, which was a great technology. But unfortunately, the aerospace industry took a bit of a dive, if you pardon the pun, and all the money went out of aerospace like overnight. I mean, the Irish government had kind of followed the pattern of, backing different technology sectors, and they'd been attracted from the computer industry, and then thinking, what's the next wave? And there was a lot of interest in aerospace, and so Team Aer Lingus and what have you had been formed, and Shannon Aerospace, and so there was a lot of interest in the government in funding aerospace projects. But unfortunately, aerospace industry took a real bad dive, and all the money dried up. So I was back in Ireland, having basically put every penny I had into this new aerospace market that wasn't there. And so it was a tough time. We had 3 kids under 5, and bank were coming in looking to take the house off me, and I was fighting rear guard, sort of trying to keep the banks at bay, and at the same time trying to bring some money in, to the house. Yeah, so it wasn't a great time, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, and you're now back in Galway, and it's not the same landscape, we'll say, as
No,
London. You have maybe more opportunity kind of in your world. So what did you do, or what did you decide you would do then?
well, I, first off, I guess when we had to tidy up and shut the aerospace project down, um, and then I was trying to find work, and there wasn't much around, and I got a job. But I was an engineer, and I felt I could do anything pretty much in engineering. And there was a job came up, and someone told me there was a company, Mercury Engineering in Dublin, who did civil engineering works, and they've been involved out in Libya. Um, and that's the story. I always say that I designed tanks for Colonel Gaddafi, but they were irrigation tanks. and it was a project that they'd got run into a problem with in Libya, where they needed to uh, find a way to filter water into these. They found a huge lake of underground water. I think BP were drilling for oil, and they found water, which is very useful in if you live in a desert society country. So the water was pumped by Colonel Gaddafi's engineering to all the villages and towns, and this company, Mercury Engineering, put tanks in to hold the water, but they were silting up with all the sediment from this, this lake that was thousands of years old under the ground, under the desert. And so I designed a retrofittable system to filter the water and automatically fill the tanks and what have you. And it was a no fault, no fee. It was basically I had to design it, get it prototype built, and shipped to Libya. And then once it got approved, I got paid. But yeah, so I remember we were really on the, people say there wasn't a bean in the house. It was literally that. I was at a point where there was nothing left and in the fridge, and I'd been an independent guy since I was 16. I paid my own way and earned my own wages. So, the thought of having to go back and ask my family to bail me out was tough, but they obviously didn't know how bad we were. The situation was, because they would have. But luckily, the check came in from, as I say, the check came in Colonel Daffy. It wasn't from him personally, but anyhow, that saved me. And then I did a couple of other roles, run the factory and different things, and kind of figured, right, I'm got stable again. Now I need to figure which industry to go in. And I'd worked in petrochem and aerospace and automation. And then I thought, what's up and coming in Ireland? And at the time, MedTech was coming in. The first MedTech companies were coming into Ireland. So I thought I'll try and get a job in MedTech, learn every industry has its own nuances, learn about the MedTech area, and then come out and set up a company again. Because I never intended working for, I wasn't really a fit for the multinationals. I was always too, too pushy. I didn't like being pigeonholed or whatever. And I was too inquisitive and wanting to do things different ways. And I was annoying, I guess. So, I was better off working for myself than working for other people. So I did learn a bit about ventilation, ICU ventilation, at Puritan Bennett, which were the best company in the world in medical ventilation at that time for people in ICUs. I realized the drug delivery was very poor, and that's really the idea I came away with, that I'd develop a system that would improve drug delivery to patients in the ICU.
And I want to go back to that in a second, John. But before that, you've a litany of different kind of industries you've worked in, and certainly your career has not been linear. But somewhere along the way, there was some sort of innate confidence, obviously, that you could change industries, that you could figure out what this one is all about. Kind of where do you think that came from? That sort of that self-belief, I suppose, or self-confidence.
I think having to figure out what to do out in a building site when you're there, and go over there and sort that out, fix that, and you got instructed to do stuff, and off you went and figured out what you needed to do. And if you did it wrong, someone would let a shout at you, and you'd try and figure it out how to do it properly. So I don't know. I was always actually, I don't know whether you call it confidence or what it was, but I always had a drive and a desire to not to get rich or anything, but a desire to progress. And I always enjoy challenges in life.
Yeah.
I always work well under challenge. If there was a situation that needed sorting out, I would be trying to sort it out. I kind of both work-wise and, I'd been pretty, as I said, politically aware, and I'd have been active in terms of trying to solve things that I didn't think were right or needed fixing. So I wasn't one for sitting back and moaning and observing. I'd rather get involved and do something about it if I could.
Yeah.
And you can't always find solutions. It took me a long time to figure that out. My wife said to me one day, she said, John, and you see, an engineer, I said, if you're a good engineer, your whole thing is solving problems, right? That's what it is. You're solving to make things better, and my wife said to me, John, I'm going to tell you about a problem, but I don't want your solution. Because I used to immediately think, if someone tells me an issue, I'm thinking, how do I solve that? But sometimes, of course, you don't need to solve the problem. It's just the problem. You got to let it sit, and
Yeah.
I find that hardest.
So on to the MedTech then. You decide that you're going to solve this problem in ventilators. And I've read kind of where you said something very interesting, I think, about you kind of settled on this precision drug delivery because you said there were three critical elements in an ICU patient's outcome. So those were the caregivers, the ventilator, and the drug delivery. And that third one, the delivery, which you chose to tackle, was being overlooked. Why do you think that was so?
Yeah, it's very interesting. People often ask me where'd you come up with ideas and companies and different things. And, I help in MedTech sort of early startups. But I always say sometimes there is a thing they talk of voice of the customer in marketing, where you've got to talk to a customer and see what their needs are but I always think you need to think past the customer, because sometimes the norm has happened over many years and nobody actually is looking specifically to change it. They accept the status quo. And I think that's what happened with drug delivery to ventilated patients. ICU vents cost tens and tens of millions to develop. And they're one of the most critical pieces of kit in a hospital, in that, that ventilator has to interface totally with the patient whose life depends on it working. And their chances of getting off that ventilator depends on how well the ventilator operates with that patient. And of course, the caregiver as well, the doctors, the clinicians, the nurse and staff. But nobody with the vent. So many millions spent, all the big companies, GE, Philips, everyone building these developments that take several years to get a new ventilator platform built. But no one had really addressed how you deliver the drug to the patient. And a lot of patients, majority of patients within an ICU and anywhere in the world, have a respiratory condition that's being treated, whether it's pneumonia or whatever, but there's part of their treatment is for treatment of the lung. And yet the drug delivery method that was predominantly being used was to pump people full of drugs through intravenous or subcutaneous. So if you had Pseudomonas infection and a ventilator-associated pneumonia or something, the drug would be pumped through stronger and stronger antibiotics through your vascular system, and obviously that going through other organs caused lots of complications. Whereas the whole premise of what's effective drug delivery is to deliver the minimum amount of a drug to have the optimum effect. And so, to me, why would you be pumping it through the bloodstream to get into the lung, whereas you've got a route down immediately to the lung through the ventilator? And so that was really my thought. And when I looked at how poor the drug delivery. No one had put money into the drug delivery systems. They're all developing and I say the nearest analogy I can give would be to buy a brand new top of the range BMW or Mercedes and get into the car and find it's got a transistor radio. It's like there was a mismatch in the technology as far as I was concerned. So I just set about, this is a problem that hadn't really been recognized or talked about, but really did need solving. When you think the systems that were used with adults, only about 3% of the drug was getting to the patient, into the lung of the patient. I thought this is very inefficient delivery and very inefficient system for an engineer to cope with. So I thought, no, got to be a better way to do it than this. And really, that's what I set out to do, and really was the formation of the company we have today.
And so, you come to that decision. Had you sort of a team or a network built up at that stage within that sort of medtech world to kind of help propel you forward, or how did you go kind of?
Yeah. Well, I was always, although I was an engineer, I always worked. I wasn't an engineer for sitting in the office. I was an engineer who wanted to be out and look firsthand at what the problems were. I never liked the idea of someone coming back and telling me what the problem was I needed to fix. I wanted to see firsthand what the issue was, and go out and try and get the best solution. And I guess I was recognized for that anywhere I worked. So it with the ventilator company, they were all the time, the commercial people were all the time pulling me out to go out to the field with them to talk to the clinicians or the customers and about problems that needed solved. And so I built up a good reputation and had good contacts in the US and in the field. And so when I started working on this, even the company, when I left Puritan Bennett, they had said to me, basically, if I can get a solution, that they would use it on their ventilators. So, that they gave me a lot of contract work to do as well. So I kind of bootstrapped the company by doing consultancy contract engineering whilst working on this product solution as well. So that's really how I got the company off the ground. I didn't go out and raise loads of money. I bootstrapped the company, and I guess that's why I still have control of the company.
And you've said something that I loved about that product people shouldn't be afraid of finance, that maybe it's easier to learn business and finance than it is to learn engineering, which I would imagine is true. Do you think that sort of thinking again was coming to the fore? Like, I'll figure it out. This, yeah.
I got it, and one of the things in that robotics company, it really was formative for me because I was the first employee. I just come off the course and got a job immediately as they started recruiting. So I got involved in the very early stages where they were raising money, and I got dragged along to presentations up in London, the city of London, to the merchant banks, because there wasn't really a venture capital world. The venture came from the merchant banks at that time. So you'd present to these bankers up in the city. And, as a lad growing up in South London, I assumed these guys were they were very wealthy. And I assumed that fellas driving around in the flashy cars and the suits and what have you must be really super intelligent people to be earning all this big money. And of course, when I got exposed to them and some of the stupid questions they would ask, I thought, these guys aren't necessarily. Now, I'm not saying they're not all of them weren't bright, but I certainly felt I'm as smart as them guys. And as I do say jokingly when I do MBA classes and do lectures and what have you, I do say, about the hands up who are the accountants and engineers here, and you get people put up their hands, and I say, well, good news for the engineers, you can certainly do accounting. And, that because it's true, the maths in, if you do engineering, there's no reason why you can't get a good handle on finance. And, you know, um,
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of enjoyed it as well. I enjoyed that pitch side of things. And I guess, again, the sort of how I grew up, and I can even, my uncle out on the farm who stayed behind when we come back from Ireland, he'd wait until my mum came home with us, and then he'd bring me off as a little boy out to the farms out in Connemara, and we'd be buying and cattle, selling, buying calves. He used to fatten calves, so he'd be, and sell them. But we'd go out into the fairs, and you'd see all the negotiations going on, and and I guess I got lots of exposure to people and dealing with people, and so I think that's very important. I mean, all my kids, I try and get them out there and work. And you've got to work in when they're at college or school or whatever to go out and do jobs, because you've got to get exposed to public. And the sooner you do that in your life and learn how to communicate and deal with difficult people, often the better it is,
Yeah.
And so,
And
yeah, I think that kind
every
of,
job teaches you something, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So there's no denying it, right? Fast forward to today, and Aerogen is one of Ireland's, if I think maybe Ireland's largest Indigenous MedTech firm, grown over 20% a year for a decade. You recently announced a 300 million euro investment and 725 new jobs, I think, over the next decade. Um, Did you ever kind of imagine, or was there a plan that it would reach this scale? Kind of when you think back to those early days,
N-
did you think
no.
it would become this big?
No, I wouldn't. I'm not one for retrospective history, but it definitely. No, no. I honestly set out to solve a problem, and if I can solve a problem and put food on the table for my family at the same time, that was what my ambition was really. But I guess one thing I didn't want to work for big multinationals. I'd done that. I'd worked in the different industries, and I knew I wasn't suited to it. Now, if I'd have stayed in it, maybe I would have worked my way up the system, but I think I would have probably annoyed too many people to have done that. So, uh, yeah, I wanted to control my destiny, if that
Hmm.
as much as look, how much do any of us control our destiny? One of my dad's cousins was a priest. He's dead now, Father Joe. But I remember him saying to me once, I was telling him about Aerogen, the business in the early days, and what I was planning to do, and I'm planning to do. And he said, John, he said, the sure way to make God laugh. And I said, what's that? He said, plan what you're going to do tomorrow. It's true. I'm not a great I don't I'm not one of these people who sit down with 5-year plans and then try and network people to achieve your ambitions, and it's based on wealth, and that honestly never was how I worked at all. I was more based on being trying to do right things and do them well, and maybe a little bit of a chip on the shoulder. You grow up in a sort of, we didn't grow up poor, but we grew up in, it certainly wasn't a wealthy environment. And so you're all the time kind of battling, that you can prove you can do stuff no matter what. So, yeah, so I no great ambitions to grow a big company. In fact, I loved it when I knew everybody's name and their wife's name and their kids' names and everything. But the problem is in today's world, you can't stand still. You've got to keep driving forward. As I say, there's really, if you key the key things in business to me are purpose and ambition. So you've got to have a purpose to be successful for me. Unless I felt I had a purpose in what I was doing, I just wouldn't have the drive and the energy and enthusiasm to keep doing it. But I know the work we do it has great purpose. So we're very fortunate, privileged to work in the area we do. And then ambition, because I know if you aren't driving forward and growing, you're stalling, and then if you're stalling, you're going to fall. So that's really the drive. I never liked sitting back and sitting on the laurels and thinking, haven't we done well? It's like there's always a real. Like for our teams, and we have like over 200 people working overseas now, in the company all around the world. We're in 80 countries, and our products are used. But we drive our commercial business hard. We would be clinically, technically excellent, and we drive that hard. But the expectation at the beginning of every year is not how much did we do last year and what can we do this year. It's basically, well, we're going to grow the business 20% plus this year. What do you need to achieve it? So
Yeah.
start with that basic premise, not start with where you are and say, what can you add? Just say you are going to do this. Now, what do you need to achieve that? And then you make sure that your leaders in your company are given the resources they need, and then let it go. And I guess one of the things that's different with Aerogen is that over all the years of our business, we've reinvested all the profits of the business back into the company. So the money goes back in. We'd be very profitable as a business, but we put it back into research, development, and clinical research. And yeah, so we strive for excellence, I guess, and we want to be the best. We are considered the best in the world at what we do, and honestly, I'd only be interested in that being the best. If ever I thought we weren't the best, I'd be out of it.
And that's interesting, because now you are sort of stepping into another realm, right into the biopharma space. So definitely not resting on your laurels, and I believe you're developing a drug for premature babies. I mean,
Yeah,
is that a big shift? Kind of what's the thinking about going
it's
into that
it's
world?
yeah, it's it's a mammoth shift for a device business to shift into pharma. It's everybody thinks life science, healthcare, drugs, devices. We get bundled together all the time, but the it's a very different industry, pharma, and it's incredibly. I guess that if I say to people who haven't worked in both, if you work in a medical device area and you develop a technology and you get it to market, you'll probably get it to market. How well it does, it might do better than you assume or not as good as you assume, but if you're a good technical person, you'll get it there. With pharma, it's a real challenge. You're several years funding massive amounts into research, clinical research and clinical studies. And everything basically hinges on your final pivotal study and whether you hit an endpoint or not. And if you don't, there's not a middle ground. It's not like it's really binary. It's 1 or 0. You either get to market as a drug or you don't. And really all the research money you put in, all the years of work are just gone.
Yeah.
So it's like high stakes, but what else are we going to do? I don't want to buy a yacht or a plane or anything, and so it's a big challenge. And I mean, it's a challenge because first time I saw a baby, prem baby, being intubated for surfactant delivery, I was just totally gobsmacked. I could not believe, having worked in ICU technologies and worked on life support vents and the sophistication of them. I could not believe how crude and invasive a process it was to the most vulnerable patient in the hospital, the prem baby, whose airways are paper thin, and they have to open up their airway. Surfactant with the drug is it's effectively the lubricant of the lung. It's like WD-40 of the lung. I explain it as it allows the alveoli to expand and contract, and the lungs to expand and contract, and therefore blood gas exchange, oxygenation of the blood. It's a naturally triggered protein phospholipid that's regulated. It's turned on effectively as the baby nears just full gestation. But then if the baby's born prem, it's born without this turned on, and it's not really ready to breathe room air. And the baby's lungs are very stiff. And that's why when we breathe maybe 20 breaths per minute, something like that on average. Prem baby could be breathing 60, 80 breaths per minute, and you watch them and they're breathing like this. But it's very little movement. It's really a vibration because they can't expand their lungs to bring the oxygen into their bloodstream. And, so it's very challenging for the neonatologist and clinicians. How do you how does this baby survive? And they found out maybe 40 years ago, 30 years ago, that surfactant taken from the lungs of cattle or pigs could be distilled, refined, and then poured into the baby's lung, and that improved survival rates of these babies massively. It was probably a biggest step in survival rates in prem babies. But the problem is it has a lot of complications because they've got to open the baby's airways and thread a tube down into the baby's bifurcation point of the lung, and then they pour this down the tube and bag it in, and then shake the baby to coat the lung, and then pour it out before the baby asphyxiates on it. And it's terribly tough process for the baby. But the clinician will make the decision to do it because they'll think they don't do that, the baby will likely die. So no one wants to intubate the baby, but that has to happen for the baby's survival. So when I seen this, I thought we've got to fix this one. It's a problem that's got to get fixed. So we're probably the only company in the world, I felt, who could aerosolize, had the technology and knowledge around aerosolization of small particles, because you have to get very tiny particles to go in through a nasal cannula on the baby. So you just put nasal prongs, baby's nose, and babies are obligate nasal breathers. So they'll breathe through the nose anyhow. And then as they breathe, we have a sensor on the baby's body, and it senses the baby trying to breathe. And as it tries to breathe, we aerosolize a small amount of the surfactant that's then carried down in aerosol form, deposits on the lung. And so it's incredibly difficult to do. It's, engineering wise, we're talking about particles here to give you an idea of, because we talk for adults, typically probably 4 microns is be like a droplet size that will travel and bounce down your airways and deposit in the lung. If you're much bigger than that, they join together and they rain out, so they don't travel into your lung. So to put that in scale, a hair on your head might be 40 microns. If you cut it, chop the hair and measured the diameter, it might be 40. So we're making particles that are a tenth of a diameter of a hair in your head. But then if you go to prem babies, as challenging as that technology is, we have to develop the next evolution of that technology, because we had to get down at 2 and 2.5 microns. And there you're talking about droplets that might be less than a half the size of a red blood cell. So, you're really tiny. And surfactant by its nature wants to froth and foam. So it's like a soap. So it's very, very tricky to try and aerosolize it without it behaving like washing up liquid and frothing and bubbling. So we developed the technology to do it, and we're now about to start the phase 3 clinical trial within the next number of weeks in America, which will be our pivotal trial, where hopefully we can have a massive impact on reduction of intubation requirements on babies, and hopefully push the barriers still further of survival rate for prem babies.
Wow. And that's, I mean, you talk next chapter, that also kind of plays into, I suppose, legacy in some ways. And do you think in terms of legacies? Do you think in terms of, the future of Aerogen? I know you said you don't necessarily do kind of 5-year plans or
Well,
um
I suppose I don't do, just to get that. We do 5-year plans in the business, but I don't do 5-year plans for me. I've never, is it who I think it was Einstein said about, I don't think much of the future because it comes soon enough. And I mean, yeah, we plan. You've got to plan around the business, and we have 5-year plans of the business, and we review them every year. And so we'd be very diligent in doing that. But for John Power, I guess I've never really planned a future as such. I obviously would love to see surfactant get across the line if we can do it. That would be a major achievement, to have brought, and really we've done it. And big companies shy away from this, big pharma, because two things: it's very risky working with prem babies, and they don't want risk there. And also the market size isn't big. It's far better developing a new, I don't know, painkiller or something for people with hangovers or something than developing a risky drug to deliver to prem babies. So if we didn't do it, who was going to do it? I kind of felt, yeah. So yeah, so we're going to give it the best go we can. There's no guarantees in this business, but I would dearly love to see that happen. Yeah.
Okay, so that's great, John. So maybe for just the last sort of 10 minutes, I have a couple of kind of rapid fire, shorter questions, I think. So I'll just have at it. If you um if you to give one piece of advice, say, to someone who's just starting out as a founder, what would you?
Well, I go back to purpose and ambition. You got to, if you're going to be successful, you need to have those, and you need you need to be able to be resilient and cope with ambiguity. So it's not really one word. There's a bunch of things you need to do. Um, but you've got to also be prepared to give. You can't have everything. I think it's a fallacy of you know these days. Again, people get preached that people think that you can really get it all. You can, have the flashy cars and the big house and the holidays and have your own business and do it. It's go off and do further education. So something's got to give. It's work-life balance. It's a work-life trade-off in some regards. So be prepared for that. If you haven't got that feeling that you're going to be willing to risk and give of yourself, don't do it.
If you could go back and say something to your younger self, what would you say?
Wow. I'd say you. Yeah, I'd say not to be worried, to I think in some ways what drove me in the early days was more a fear of failure than a will to succeed. I think that's what I kind of figured it in sport as well. I always loved sport, field sports, rugby, football. But for me, it was always never to let the team down. And going into a match, it was always thinking, I'm going to do whatever it takes not to let the team down. But wouldn't go there really particularly think I'm going to do something outstanding that's going to win the cup for the team. It was. So I think that's whether that was part of as well. It's part of your makeup, but yeah, that fear of losing or fear of defeat, and maybe that was a bit of the chip on the shoulder stuff. But maybe that drove me as well.
Hmm. What's your leadership style?
It's casual. I'm not. I drive some people mad if they're used to very structured. Multinational world environment. I try and avoid that. I try and take the best of it. I'd be a big, I'd read a lot in business and business strategies, and I did a distant MBA when I was, I guess, when I had 5 young kids and everything, because I wanted to learn that business. I knew the engineering side, but I wanted to learn the business side of it. So I'd be a great believer in education and educating yourself. And you don't need to go to college to do it. You can, buy the FT Weekend Edition and read it from cover to front to cover every weekend, and you learn a lot. So no, I love reading business strategy and sorry, I forgot what the question was.
It was your leadership style, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't. I would be very much. I had to micro lead into micromanage in the early days of the business because I didn't have the money to pay people who are knowledgeable enough in different areas. But when I look around my management team today, I've got such high caliber people and so competent in their own jobs. I basically say to them, I let them run the business, and I kind of say, look, if you need me for something, ask me. And if I need to tell you something, I'll come and talk to you about it. But I'm not heavy, intense management. I set the objectives for the business, agree them with the board, and then basically rely on the people to deliver it. And if I can help, I'll help. Or if I think it needs a steer or a nudge one way or other, I'll do it.
Okay. When you take a step back, what are you most proud of, maybe both in work and in your life?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm kind of proud that I've we managed to make a go of it here in Ireland. I think my parents would have been proud of that. It's so yeah, that means a lot to me. Being an Irish company means a lot to me, and being the world's best and being an Irish company means a lot to me. And so I'd be proud of that. Yeah, and really just bringing up 5 kids, and I was fortunate. Great wife Bernadette, who and I like to think my kids are well-rounded and good people and good principles, and they're all very different, but they'd still be your core principles and would be the same. And that's really your biggest achievement, I guess, is in your family and your kids, and how you because they'll be here when you're gone, hopefully, and they'll carry on your whatever legacy you have.
Yep. And last question, because this is the AIMS podcast, I wanted to ask you, you've been involved with AIMS for a while now.
Yeah.
What made you want to get involved, or what What's your kind of interest there?
It was honestly, it was the enthusiasm of the founders of Ames, and it was, I really loved that, that because Ames didn't, when you think about it, you've got people that are in very senior, demanding jobs in surgery and what have you, and probably with no spare time really, and yet the drive to go off and do this and create what has become a really, really well known now and growing event. Very important as well, particularly today in terms of Irish and US links. That was what attracted me to it. I thought I'm going to help these guys whatever way I can because I love their enthusiasm.